We are proud to introduce you to the Forgotten Flyway. Bringing respect to the Atlantic Flyway name.
We're here. We finally figured this out. We overcame quite a few obstacles trying to get this whole technology thing figured out. But this is the first and inaugural episode, hopefully of many episodes, of the Forgotten Flyway. I'll kind of highlight this. I'm Christian Hackenberg, played football, was a meathead for the most of my life. And then I got Brendan Swieger here, who I got to meet, just through a DM, which I'm sure is the new thing now. But Brendan runs a guiding service in Pennsylvania. I got to go on a goose hunt with him when I was up covering the football team this year. And we've kind of snowballed into this. And it was a project. We're both outdoorsmen, grew up around it. This is probably my biggest passion outside of sports and my family. So Brendan spitballed this with me, and this is where we're going. So Brendan, I appreciate you for lighting a fire under my ass. And I'm really excited to bring this to life.
Yeah, for sure. Very, very exciting. This is something that we did not plan on whatsoever, and it just was mentioned in conversation and snowballed from there. It's kind of cool how sitting in a goose blind, just passing time, not shooting any birds, can spur ideas like this. So I think maybe we hunted on a Saturday, and the following Monday we were talking on the phone, and I had just briefly mentioned that it might be a cool thing, considering you host another podcast, that it would be cool to learn about podcasts from you because I wanted to start one someday, maybe. And your immediate response was, "Oh, dude, I was thinking about doing the same thing." So we kind of just collaborated from there and put some pen to paper, and here we are. This is the Forgotten Flyway.
Yeah, we fortunately had AJ Norton shooting with us. He was running a camera that day. But that's kind of the genesis, right? Like you've grown up in this world, and we'll dive into it a little bit deeper, but you've got a lot of relationships, specifically waterfowl hunting. And like I grew up deer hunting. My grandfather kind of hunted big game like all over the world, from like Dall sheep up in Denali to stag in Ireland. So he really got the bug with me at a very young age, and I love deer hunting, and then kind of tripped into waterfowl hunting, got a dog, got the boat, got 7-8 shotguns, and now it's like it's over for me. So the genesis of this has been like waterfowl hunting specifically, and waterfowl hunting on the Atlantic Flyway, which is our home turf. And AJ, shoots some great stuff. So we're going to be bringing a bunch of short clips. We're going to be highlighting hunts, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then I think that there's a bigger side of this, Brendan, and I think this is where your background comes in. And I want you to kind of talk about your calling history, how you got into the waterfowl industry and waterfowl hunting specifically, and then kind of how that snowballed into running a guiding service, also guiding in pretty much every other major flyway in America at some point in time. Like, start that whole thing, because I think it paints the bigger picture of like why we care so much about our home turf.
Sure. So I, in a similar way, got the bug when I was very young. I was on the complete opposite side of the spectrum, where my dad didn't shoot his first deer until he was in his early 20s. He didn't really grow up a true outdoorsman and developed into one throughout his early adult life. And fortunately for me, I was included in all those plans from as soon as I was able to be tagging along with him. So some of my earliest hunting experiences were with my dad in September goose season with him and his crew buddies. He used to dabble a little bit in guiding here local in central Pennsylvania. And I remember being put under a goose shell when I was small enough to fit under a Magnum goose shell that wasn't one of the massive blinds. So I was included in waterfowl hunts from a very young age, and I was always fairly interested in them until I started to hunt deer. I shot my first deer at 12 years old, and there was a time where I was convinced I was going to be on, the Dream Season TV, shooting whitetails in Missouri or Illinois. And my dad actually had to bribe me into going on my first duck hunt. I had a German short-haired pointer at that time. I liked to pheasant hunt. Wing shooting wasn't really my thing. I just wanted to shoot deer with a bow. So my dad told me, "Hey, we can take the dog out for pheasants in the afternoon if you just come sit with me for an hour." It was one of the first youth hunts that Pennsylvania had, a designated day at the end of September that youth from 12 to 16 can go out with an adult. And we saw two ducks, and I was instantly addicted. It was two wood ducks. We were hunting a small creek. Little did I know at that time how special those little creeks would become to me, but it was just a trout stream in the middle of the mountains in central Pennsylvania. We had a pair of wood ducks come really low and buzz the decoys. And as soon as they got right over top of the decoys, they sprung straight up in the air. And I remember seeing the wad go about 4 feet behind that last duck. And from that moment, I wanted to sell my bow to get a shotgun, and I was already looking at all kinds of decoys and catalogs, and I was like, how am I going to get these things to come land so I can shoot them easier? So from that moment, I was infatuated with ducks and specifically duck calling. That would eventually spill into things like goose hunting, and I found a direct translation with turkey calling and now elk hunting. So I've learned that the communication with the game that you're chasing is my favorite part. Right around that time, I didn't really have any resources for duck calling other than the little bit that my dad could do on a duck call, which was enough to call him in. But I was also hearing some guys on some tapes that were professionals like Jeff Foyles and Fred Zink. And I was like, man, I want to do the notes that those guys are doing. So I got my hands on pretty much every instructional DVD I could find, Gander Mountain closeout sections. I got my first duck call was a Primos wench. And I got my dad to drive me to a local boat ramp where there are a ton of dock ducks hang out. They're always super vocal down there, so I wanted to listen to the ducks and just try to mimic what sounds they were making. I didn't know what they meant at that time, but all I knew was I wanted to sound like those things. So eventually that did progress into doing a little bit of contest calling here and there, doing a couple different odds and end jobs within the waterfowl industry, and then eventually guiding full time. And that stemmed from starting here in Pennsylvania and going the whole way as far as Lubbock, Texas.
Dude, you can definitely blow a goose call. We haven't shared a duck blind yet, but I assume that's probably pretty impressive as well. It's funny, man. Like I had the same type of sickness. Now, obviously, I haven't taken it or haven't had the time to get up there and go into a calling competition or anything like that. But similarly to you and my background in sports, like when you get into something, you want to be the best at it. You want to make sure that, and then when you consider the fact that you're hunting and you're taking the life of something, like you want to do it as ethically as possible, and you want to use every tool at your disposal to make it as fun and enjoyable for not only yourself, but like everyone that's with you. So I dove into that hard, man. And like my first duck hunts were on big water, like bay water down in Virginia. I grew up in Virginia. I'm in South Jersey now. I'm actually, like you said, some of those smaller creeks that mean so much to you. Like I do a week or a yearly trip with a bunch of my buddies up here down to my grandpa's place on the eastern shore of Virginia. So I'm getting my checklist together right now before we hopped on. But I remember I shot probably a box and a half of shells at Bufflehead and Brant all morning, didn't hit one, finally water swatted one, and, was the happiest dude ever. And then finally got back to it. Right. But when you talk about your calling background, I think this is really important too. And you kind of skimmed over it. Like you were very successful in that endeavor at a very young age, which is also impressive and tells a lot about you. Walk me through the qualification for Arkansas and how many state titles did you win? Like walk me through some of those ribbons you got hanging back there.
So actually, a lot of these ribbons that are over here are for my dog, who's surprisingly not under my feet at this very moment. This trophy up here is from the Waterfowl Festival in Easton, Maryland. In 2015, I was still in my late teens at that point, and I was able to get third place in the World Live Duck Calling Contest there. I won 2 times Pennsylvania State Championship. I do have a New Jersey Goose Calling Championship plaque up there somewhere. There was a lot of contests. I didn't really do a ton of traveling for it. I did get to go to Arkansas and blow on Main Street. I've blown on that stage 3 times now, and there's nothing like it. It's I'm a pretty big fan of high pressure situations and nice adrenaline dumps. As far as you can get in waterfowl, I think that's probably the biggest adrenaline rush outside of a couple thousand snows or a couple hundred mallards dumping in on you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it's a really good rush. I'm a pretty competitive person by nature, and due to some concussion problems, I may or may not have been cleared for certain sports in high school. So I decided to take my competitive nature elsewhere. So the golf team just wasn't really cutting it for me. So yeah, they don't really hand out scholarships for 82s. So I decided to focus on blowing a duck call, and I was able to turn blowing a duck call into full-time employment at one point.
That's awesome, man. So that's Brendan. He's got a lot more to it, and I'm sure you're going to get to know us. As I kind of said, I'm Christian, and I played football at Penn State, played in the NFL for a few years, and that took away the vast majority of my really nerdy hunting endeavors from the time I was about 14 till I was about 25, 26. Still got it in. Better believe that, but not as much as I would have liked to. And now I'm catching up, even with some kids in the mix. But I think that kind of brings us back now to where we're at. Like, you grew up in Pennsylvania, I grew up in Virginia, I'm in Jersey now. And the one thing that I haven't had the experiences that you had of like being able to go out and guide and hunt different flyways and see different things. You know, I've spent some time in Memphis in the spring, but drove around, saw some really cool stuff up in Jonesboro area, Northeast Arkansas. We went across the river, but like I never got to hunt over there. Right. So like for me, all I know really is the Atlantic Flyway, and I know the grind that comes with it. And I've been fortunate enough to get with some friends who have some private land spots that are really, really good. I've gotten with some old heads who've put me on some really good hunts on public. And then I've found some stuff just being a nerd and having free time. And, you know, my eyes still hurt from all the maps I've looked at in the past 5 years. But, you know, you grind it out here, man. It's some good hunting. And I've, you know, like all consuming, you try to consume everything you can about waterfowl hunting. So I'm listening to podcasts every time I'm driving more than an hour and a half, an hour. I'm listening to a Ducks Unlimited podcast. I'm listening to any of the other Chad Belding's Foul Life podcast. I'm listening to them all, just trying to pick up little things here and there that I could use or try to use or whatever. And the one thing I always kind of hear is the Atlantic Flyway is just a breeze over point that they almost have to just check a box that they covered it. And like I said, my experience has been kind of slightly different. It's tougher. We got more people, we got more development. We don't have as much WMAs or access to them for that matter. I just love the history too about reading the books about the Chesapeake Bay, the Susquehanna Flats, like even down in Core Sound in North Carolina, like the market hunting days and the development of waterfowling started on this flyway. Everything else came as we moved west, but waterfowl hunting and the culture, I think, really started on this flyway. And you have decoy carvers, not as much call makers. You have some, but the decoy carvers are like awesome. I've turned a couple, or tried my hand at making a few rigs. I got one that I'm actually hunting over for the first time this week, so I'm fired up about that. But
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm fired up about it. I'll send you some pictures. But it's like, for me, the history of this flyway doesn't get, there's books, there's all these things, but it doesn't get the continual press that I think it deserves. And I think that's part of our mission here, is like, how can we continue to highlight, again, not just the great stuff, but the good, the bad, and the ugly of hunting the Atlantic Flyway consistently.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some of the ugly, because there's a lot of that to go around in our flyway, and that's kind of an emphasis on the point that we're trying to make with, you know, the podcast and a cinematic film series about the Atlantic Flyway and the East Coast. There's a lot of ugly that comes with hunting on a consistent basis here. Now, that could mean struggling with, you know, 5 foot deep mud and tidal marshes. It could mean struggling with, your concentrations of birds stay in safety zones. There's guys that I've had come hunt here from, Idaho, and they get here and they're just shocked at the amount of development and the challenges that we have to face just this early season. I had a gentleman from Idaho come out here, and we're talking about a couple of different comparisons between what he does, where he basically just finds 1,000 mallards hitting a cut cornfield, and it's almost all but a guarantee he can get permission on it. Whereas here, if you find 12 ducks and they're not within 150 yards of a house, you got to figure out how to hunt it, because 250 ducks that might be, passing by and you might be able to traffic, they're hanging out. They know that they're safe in certain areas, and they're just going to stay in those safe zones. So there's a lot of different struggles that come along with trying to hunt on the East Coast as compared to hunting in the Midwest or out West.
One thing that because you bring up that point too, like our duck's the black duck, and you hear about all these guys from Arkansas wanting to come up here and shoot black ducks. It's like a crown jewel down there. I got a lot of respect for them because I think they're the weariest of ducks. You can fool a big wad of black ducks, man, like you're doing something right, especially on the salt. I think they're a little bit dumber when they're on freshwater, but that's just my personal assumption. But on the salt, the hide, the whole combination, like black ducks are as hard to hunt as anything, and they're fun and it's as rewarding. But our mallard population is technically considered a subspecies, right? Like there's some crossbreeding that goes into it when it comes to the Atlantic Flyway mallards. So I almost think like some of those problems that you're talking about with the ducks just sitting just goes back to their genetic DNA makeup, as opposed to the mallards that you're getting in the Mississippi and the Central Flyways, where they're almost 100% wild mallards, and they move. They still have the clock where they move throughout, or they still have that innate urge within them where they're going to move throughout the day, from whether it's feed to loaf to feed, back and forth. They still have these or just random flights that cause, you to want to sit out there all day. Like for me, there's points of times and there's certain areas where like I know I need weather or I need some other crazy event to be in that area at that point in time to shoot my ducks past 8:00, or it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, and that's something that we're gonna really, really touch on here, and I do intend to invite a biologist on to talk about this, because I know I can speak for myself here. I'm not a biologist, so I don't want anyone to take anything that we're saying here as
I will second that. I will second that. This is not science. This is purely observational post-hunt bullshitting going on.
This is purely anecdotal facts. So we're not biologists, but we do waterfowl hunt on a very consistent basis, and we do have good relationships with some individuals that are involved in these conservation organizations. I do know that it is factual that our mallards on the East Coast were not here. They are not native to our flyway. They do not belong here. In my opinion, they inhibit black ducks from actually producing at the rate that they should. That being said, I will shoot greenheads 8 out of 7 days a week if you tell me to. Yeah. I have nothing against it. Leg. I'm not mad that they're here. You're not going to have to twist my arm to shoot greenheads. But if you gave me the chance to shoot all black ducks or all greenheads, I'm picking black ducks every single time.
Yeah, I think there's something to that, and I'm really curious to see what this biologist has to say, because I think we still base a lot of our bag limits off of our mallard population too. If is that a correct statement?
I believe so. I know they do a lot of surveys up north during breeding and nesting season, and a gentleman that we're going to have on here with us several times, Tyler Coleman, has actually helped out with those studies. We're going to be able to pick his brain a little bit more about exactly what they're looking for and what they're doing during these surveys. So,
because I remember the days when we had one black duck.
Yeah,
like when we could only kill one black duck.
A long time.
We got 2 now. I'm fired up about that. But then I always make the argument. It's funny. Like me and my buddies will be sitting there and I'm like, man, like we got our mallard limit bumped up to 4 here in Jersey. And I'm like, I'd rather take 2 mallards all day and be able to fill a 3 or 4 bag limit with black ducks, just because that's what I'm seeing. It's the numbers of what I'm seeing. But again, that's anecdotal and it's probably very selfish of me. And there's definitely a bunch of research and and science that goes into why things are what they are. But
Yeah, and
that's
I
neither
can
here nor there.
speak to that. We're seeing, and we're recording this January 7th, 2025, and this year to date, I have seen more black ducks than any other season that I've hunted on the East Coast.
It's crazy. I just saw my first big push of mallards. And like the cool thing is we've had several weather events throughout the season, like way more than last year, that you would think would probably push more birds down here. But I just saw my first big push of mallards, my hunt Saturday morning. I did a little solo with my dog, and it's just this one public spot that gets pounded to hell. And you and I have this little theory that this migration's been delayed by like a month. And it's just historical data. I try to keep a notebook. 3 or 4 years ago, early December 7th to be exact, me and my buddies, I scouted, I found them, and it was a whole mess of mallards in this one little marsh that we can get into off of Bigger Creek here in South Jersey. And I'm like, my one buddy owns his own plumbing company. I'm like, whatever you got to do, clear schedule tomorrow. I saw more mallards in this hole than I've ever seen in my life. We go in there and we have a banger on public. Like, it was insane. I think 4 guys, we all shot our mallards, shot a couple bonus black ducks, a couple wood ducks. It was cool. But with that in mind, I'm sitting here going, okay, it's January, 5th, 4th, 5th, 6th, whatever it was on Saturday. And I'm like, I'm going to go check this hole and see what's up. I'll do a little scout hunt. And sure as shit, dude, I shot my ducks, saw a lot. Then I was like, okay, that's good. And I'm running out on the main creek, and every bend was holding just an obscene amount. There's some black ducks and maybe even a few other more fun ducks in there, but every single one of them had a pile of mallards sitting in there with geese. It was insane. And that was like the first big push of mallards that I saw this year. I say all that to get to that point.
Yeah, we've had a really slow and kind of weird start to the season. The geese were really late, and it seemed like the ducks were really just slowly trickling down here. Then we finally picked up some ducks, and then as soon as we picked up the ducks, it seemed like about half of them were here. We got to warm up with 20-25 mile an hour south winds, and we lost all of our ducks, and then the guys up in the Finger Lakes started pounding the shit out of them.
Banging them up.
So there's, I think that with geo trackers and backpacks, GPS transmitters, we're starting to learn a lot more about reverse migration habits. And there's, a long time it was pretty sacrilegious to say anything even regarding close to reverse migration. But there's been some studies going on, and I've got a cool band story actually from an Arkansas hunt. But we were hunting in December in flooded timber in central Arkansas, and we shot a wood duck band that was from October in Louisiana of the same year. So it was banded 2 months prior, several hundred miles south of where we were hunting. So it quite literally proved reverse migration in that instance. So there's a lot of people that might say, yeah, it's just a theory or a hypothesis, but it's being proven, and there's a lot of geo tracker and GPS transmitter data that's being pulled that's confirming these things. And I think it's a very, very real problem that we have to deal with during the season if you're trying to hunt on a regular basis here.
Yeah. You got to find them and you got to stay on them. And it's that is specifically in our flyway. You got to stay on them. Because to your point, I mean, it even goes as small as like just even in the demographic of South Jersey, there's 3 or 4 different areas that have what you would consider more agriculture than others. And just with goose hunting, I have an older gentleman who I goose hunt with who was absolutely murdering the geese during that first cold push, right when that opened at the end of December. And then he's been slow, and I'm 35 minutes south of him, and all these fields are absolutely covered with Canadas right now. And I've been doing pretty good on my little piece that I have, getting my father-in-law into it, which is fun. But he was out this morning. He's like, yeah, I'm just not seeing the numbers I saw 2 weeks ago. Everyone in all my buddies down in your area are saying that they're banging them up and this and that. And, so just even on a small level, from a county to a county basis, it could be some type of slight push movement with winds and different roosts and lobes and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, yeah. And just to add to that point, we're gonna nerd out on bands, not because they're cool to have on your lanyard. I'm a nerd about the data. I
Yeah.
love the data. I love to learn. I love to try to imagine flight paths and how certain birds end up in certain areas. And through my group of buddies, shooting a handful here and there, we've learned that there's some local flocks, and we talk to guys in areas that we shoot bands from that are a considerable distance from here that are supposedly resident geese. And you'll shoot a band from 150 miles away that was supposed to be a local bird, a resident bird to that area. So we're going to take a deep dive into some of that type of data later and try to figure out and take notes and compare notes and figure out what type of weather systems or what type of success in agriculture are having effects on these local birds that technically aren't supposed to migrate per se, but do end up 150 miles away in the same state.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool stuff, and I'm excited to see this too. Like this last snow push, like you said, came from the south. We're supposed to get another one on Saturday, and I'm going to be down south, so I'm really curious to see kind of what that does. The last few snowstorms I've had down in Virginia have been nor'easters, so it's been really interesting just kind of taking those notes. I think you really have to keep a good journal, or you have to have a really good memory on this flyway to have a bunch of success. You have to know when, even the tides, dude. Like when you're hunting salt, I hunt a lot of salt here in Jersey. Like the tide differentiation from, are you hunting the incoming or you're hunting the outgoing? Is the moon some type of way or not another type of way? And you start lining up all these different factors that play into ultimately why birds want to be in one area at one given time, and how you can line all of those up to replicate success. And it's funny when you do that, how many times you do have similar success, given that your hide and all that stuff's taken care of as well. It's really, you really got to dive into it. And I may be speaking out of ignorance, but I feel like some of these other places, to your point, like your gentleman out in Idaho, you got mallards in a field, you got mallards in a field. You know what I mean? And their mallard numbers are probably much, much more significant than ours.
Right. Yeah, and no matter where you go in the country, the moon is extremely important, and I'm always paying attention to moon phase, just as someone that's trying to chase a 200-inch whitetail would. The moon
Yep.
phase is just as important to me as it is to a whitetail hunter, and there's direct relations with moon phase and daytime versus nighttime waterfowl movement. People don't scout for waterfowl at nighttime because you can't really see them very well, but if you're out and you pay attention and you see certain patterns lining up, certain conditions, certain weather conditions lining up with a certain moon phase, that's going to make birds move, whether it's local movement at nighttime or while feeding, or migration movement. There's plenty of different factors that can play into both different styles of movement. And that's one of the things that we're really going to bring onto this podcast is hunt breakdowns. And we're not just talking about, I was out with Christian and, if we were shooting this ammo, we might have killed more geese, or, if we had this 4-pack of decoys 8 yards further out, we might have killed 3 more geese. We're going to get into some of that kind of stuff, but we're more so going to talk about what we did to scout, what we did to prepare for the hunt, what the conditions were like, what moves we made or didn't make because of those conditions, what were the uncontrollable variables. We'll do a little bit of a hunt breakdown in a further episode here another time on the goose hunt that we went on. There was a lot of uncontrollable variables that definitely had an impact on the outcome of that hunt. Now, the most important part of being successful in waterfowl is controlling those controllables. I preach that a lot to people that come to me for advice, is control everything that you can control and try to pay attention to the uncontrollables to use them to your advantage. If it's an uncontrolled variable that is, you have ducks that are feeding in a cornfield and you have a super bluebird sunny day, high pressure, super late sunset, birds are coming in the evening, can't shoot past sunset, but the ducks are really actually showing up 20 minutes after, well, maybe you ought to wait for a day where you can't control the weather, but you can control when you hunt. So maybe
Right.
taking a step back and not having a bunch of headlamps picking up decoys in the field when the ducks show up because you hunted on a sunny day. Maybe just show a little bit of restraint and wait for a weather day. Get some snow, get some rain, at a very minimum, get some good overcast to make that, that last light period to those ducks seem like it's coming a little bit earlier, and your success rate's going to increase. So that kind of brings me to another point that we have to get back to. We definitely went down some rabbit holes here.
Yeah.
Just the forgotten
We're going to go
flyway
down plenty
in
of
general.
rabbit holes.
Oh yeah. That's
Yeah.
that's half of this podcast. Is half of what it's going to be is rabbit holes. So the forgotten flyway, we want to highlight the ups and the downs of hunting on the Atlantic Flyway in the East Coast. Now, while we're doing that, we want to also highlight some of the history and heritage of the Atlantic Flyway. We have decoy carvers. Arkansas doesn't have decoy carvers, they have call makers.
Yep.
Now, mainly because their hunting styles are a lot different than ours here. Down there, they didn't start hunting with decoys, they started hunting with calls. Because in flooded timber, if the ducks are close enough, if you call them close enough to see if there's decoys in there or not, you're going to shoot them. Whereas out here, some days you're better off not even taking your duck calls out of your blind bag. It's purely being in the right place at the right time with the decoys that those ducks want to see.
Yeah, and a lot of that goes back to the history too, like I said, of like the Susquehanna Flats and the Chesapeake Bay and the market gunning days. Like it was just a sheer numbers game, especially when you're talking about the canvasbacks and the redheads and the broadbills, bluebills, blackheads, whatever you want to call them, that were, I mean, dime a dozen. And they were all over the place. And you were just shooting, you hear reports of days of guys going out there single-handedly killing 500 ducks. Like that is nuts. But that was what they used. They used the sync boxes with a gazillion decoys, and you didn't have the manufactured brands. You had to cut them out of wood yourself, man. And I think that's the cool thing too. You have the different styles. You have the Delaware River style. Chesapeake Bay has its own style, and then you even get down to like the core sound styles and stuff like that. And there's plenty of guys around here. I mean, even South Jersey. South Jersey's got a bunch of great carvers. I mean, guys who are up and coming, and also guys who've kind of fallen off and going down the back end and are just doing it for fun now. But it's really, really unique. Even sneak boxes, that's another one that I've just started to learn. I mean, I hunt out of I got a county line, so I didn't go completely old school. I went with the aluminum, kind of newer hotness. But some of these old sneak boxes, I find myself on Facebook just going down rabbit holes on Facebook Marketplace on some of these old sneak boxes, the restored ones. Like, man, it would be cool just to have a single one for me and my dog and figure it out. But there's a lot of just cool gunning history, and that's going to eat up, I think, a lot of our off season. Just being able to talk to some of these guys, let them tell their stories. There's been some folks who've done that, but I really want to give another level of like younger blood coming into this, showing respect for again our history and why we are here and what we are doing.
Yeah, for sure. And guys like us, I know I can speak for both of us on this, where the films that Ducks Unlimited produces about decoy carvers and such, we love that kind of stuff, but we're here to appeal to everyone, and we understand that a film that could be on the History Channel isn't necessarily everyone's favorite form of entertainment. So we're going to try to bring you some nice, true in-person interviews with some of these professionals, some of these gentlemen all over the East Coast that have been doing this for years and learn from their granddad that passed down from their granddad that was a market hunter or anything of that sort. That's really the most exciting part about this, is we don't exactly know what all we're going to get into.
Yeah, that's always the fun thing, and that's the fun thing about hunting in areas too, where I mean, the reason you and I are sitting here is a perfect example. I mean, you fired away a DM because you're like, hey, this kid played at Penn State, I'm a Penn State fan. See, he's posted a few things about hunting. He might be up in the area, and this is why we're sitting here, right? So I think that's the unique part, is just even social media gives you so much more access to, and a lot of the younger generation that isn't quite doing what some of the older guys are doing are figuring out ways to highlight it. So I think it's only right that we do our part with that, and I think it'll be really cool, the messaging, like you said, coming from us. We got a great team behind this with AJ doing the camera work and Tyler kind of giving some guidance, building out his own thing from taxidermy to the whole nine. So this is going to be electric, man. Like again, this is like a passion project for me. I'm doing some other stuff in this space, but like this would be really cool to really get this off the ground and build it for, again, the Forgotten Flyway folks, guys that are grinding out here just like you and me.
Oh yeah, man. I'm sitting here 9:15, sleep deprived. It's been a long week of shooting just a handful of birds. That's how it goes here.
Yeah.
It's not bangers every day, and
Yeah.
you gotta be dedicated enough to do those day long sits where it doesn't get warmer than 20 degrees. And we did that just the other day. We had to grind them out, and sometimes here, we shot 7 birds. We shot 5 ducks and 2 geese. We saw 5 ducks and 2 geese. That's all we saw all day long, dark to dark.
Got to make them count.
Yeah, for sure.
Got to make them count. Well, I guess here to wrap this up, we're going to be talking more regularly, but what do you got the rest of the year? Like I said, I kind of talked about my Virginia trip, but you got the latter half coming down here. We're on the final stretch, coming around the turn. What do you got for the back half this season here to close out?
Man, not doing a whole lot of traveling. I just got back from doing a little bit of sea duck hunting down in Maryland. I am currently just watching the weather app and the weather channel, trying to figure out when these canvasbacks are going to show up in Maryland, and I'm definitely going to go back down there and try to connect with the king of ducks. That's also, besides black ducks, one of my absolute favorites to shoot is a nice bull canvasback. So I'm anticipating their arrival right now. I got maybe 1 or 2 groups left on the books for this season. This week right here, I had a group of 4 from Virginia that was actually going to come up to shoot black ducks. Unfortunately, the gentleman did have a 6-year-old and an 11-year-old that were going to be tagging along with him. He was looking at the weather. I was looking at the weather, and as good as the hunting is going to be this week, neither one of us could justify making 2 kids sit out in 14 degrees and 20 mile an hour winds for 4 all day long sits in a row. So we're going to be doing a little bit of youth hunting with those guys in September this upcoming season. Dad decided it just wasn't a smart call for the kiddos to come up here and try to rough it out. I said, "Sir, all due respect, if it was 4 adults, I'd be telling you to get up here. But considering you have the kiddos with you, man, I'm in the business of making good core memories and not making kids hate waterfowl hunting. And given our circumstances here, I didn't think it was the right call to force them into it. So got a little bit of a lighter schedule. Going to do some buddy hunting here. The river, I live right along the Susquehanna and Juniata rivers, right pretty much at where they meet. And we're pretty well on our way to being iced out right now. Hasn't been above freezing for 5 days now. We got about 3 inches of snow yesterday, and we're looking at about 8 more inches of snow at the tail end of this week. So it's fixing to get good. The black ducks are showing up in force. I've got my eyes on a pretty cool hybrid in a hole that I want to go try to lay my eyes on and potentially get a shot at. We're seeing, a fair amount of ducks right now, but I think with everything freezing, they're really mainly getting into the corries where it's pretty hard to actually get eyes on the water and scout. So we're going to be on the road, getting some windshield time, trying to track down some ducks, and definitely hitting some spring-fed creeks that are small enough to hop across and shooting ducks at 10 yards.
That's fun. Bust out the 410. You a sub-gauge guy? You are a sub-gauge guy.
I am a sub-gauge guy. My go gun is a CZ Drake over-under 20 gauge.
There you go.
Yep. No specific brand of ammo, because I'm a firm believer in if the birds are 20 yards away, it does not matter what ammo you shoot at them.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
So I've
I
been
have
shooting.
been a little bit of a snob. I have been a little bit of a snob. I've been shooting Apex for the past few seasons. I've been really impressed with it.
I have shot. I actually just shot the last box out of my case of Apex S3.
Yeah,
I bought at the beginning of this season a case of the S3 Steel from Apex, and I have absolutely no complaints about that stuff. It hits hard, really hard.
yeah. I used to shoot the Black Cloud, and I found it getting really dirty. And I'm also the type that like I like to take care of my stuff, but I'll also abuse the hell out of it. Like my Benelli got its first cleaning of the season, and it shot a lot this year, good and bad. But got its first cleaning right before this trip down to Virginia. But yeah, dude, I got this Virginia trip, and then gonna try to finish out, the zones in Jersey. Fortunately, I can touch all 3 zones within 30 minutes of my house. So North Zone's gonna close while I'm in my trip down to Virginia, but got a few days of South Zone still there, and then the Coastal Zone stays open till the end of the month. So I will be getting salty when I get home. I'll be coming from salt to salt, but I'll be getting salty
What are
hardcore.
we?
But yeah,
What are
man,
we facing in Virginia?
dude, it's like I said, this is like my home water where I grew up duck hunting when I did it. Nerded out really like between my rookie year. Like I did a month-long sabbatical down there after my rookie year, all of January. We sucked. I played for the Jets. We sucked. Got done with my exit meeting, literally told my now wife, who was, I don't even think we were engaged at that time, but we were living together, and I was like, Tatum, I'm taking Bo. I'll see you February 1st. Like I was like, I'll see you when I see you. And I duck hunted every morning and every night on that bay and explored about every crux and crevice. And the old timer my grandfather bought the house off of, he used to commercial crab the whole bay, commercial fish it, owned a couple farms. He grew up there. He's got literally, there's a family cemetery with stones. His family settled Williamsburg. So like there's literally a family cemetery on the property that it's got dates back into the 1700s on. It's pretty cool. But John's one man, and I'd go up there and poke around with him, be like, "Hey, got any old holes you used to shoot back in the day?" He'd kind of point me in a direction and make me go figure it out. But the past like 8 years, man, we've really had a bunch of gadwall show up. You used to be able to shoot spoonbill down there until you couldn't see straight, but we've had a lot of gadwall. But what I love about that bay is like you can really see cool stuff that, because it's still like untapped for the most part. It's not as developed as New Jersey, and like even the barrier islands are really fun to get out there and kind of explore on. Like I I saw the most pintail I've ever seen in my life in my face, and we missed. We had 20 pintail in our face. Me and 3 of my buddies on our trip last year, mostly all drakes too, and it was just like it was blowing 40. I was calling at a black duck, and my buddy's like, in the decoys, and here's 20 pintails right in our face. And I was like, holy hell. And of course, like I said, blowing 40, first shot goes up, they just hooked and they were gone. I mean, they were at 60, 70 yards before I could even bat an eye. But you could shoot the flyway down there, and that's the fun thing, man. Like we went on our trip last year and we killed like 13 or 14 different species of waterfowl.
Oh,
So
that,
it was, yeah, it's super cool. I mean, widgeon, teal, gadwall, black ducks, even shot a mallard. We really don't see a lot of mallards out there, to be completely honest with you, but it's fun, man. So I'm excited. It's like timing up really good with all these weather systems right now. And like you said, reverse migration, all this stuff. I'm like, well, if those early ducks, because I love shooting gray ducks, it's like my thing. Gray ducks and teal are probably like my 2 favorite ducks to kill. When if I can get big wads of them, and I've seen it there where there's been big wads of them, so I'm getting a little antsy.
dude, it sounds like a blast. Sounds like a blast.
Yeah, you're gonna get down there. We'll get down there. It's a
For
cool
sure,
spot.
for sure.
But
Yeah, I've got to check a brant off my list. That's I feel I don't feel like my waterfowling career has been completed until I get an Atlantic brant. That's just one thing that
it's
I've never even targeted brant. And I feel like
dude,
you
it's
don't even live on the East Coast if you haven't done it. Every single one of my friends has done it. I've been invited to do it 100 times. I've just
yeah,
never gone down there and done it. So that's something that we're really going to
it's
highlight on here is just my journey to killing a brand.
I can't wait for that one. It's so funny you bring that up because that's literally, now we still get them down there, but they're all over the place in Jersey. But we still get them down in Virginia, but they're not as thick as they used to. One of my most vivid memories, my Uncle John had an offshore blind built right at the mouth of the creek. I would sit there with binoculars and we'd be shooting buffleheads and all this stuff, but I'd sit there with binoculars and I'm talking as far north as I could look on the bay and as far south as I could look on the bay. There'd just be little black dots on the barrier island side, just hopping up and down about 9 o'clock. The wad of Brant that would get up was insanity. I'm talking the numbers of Brant at that time was insane. And I would just wait till 9 o'clock and it was like, have fun. We'd have, 5-6 guys in the blind. It was a blast. And they just, when they do it so good. But yeah, Brant are a special breed, man.
Yeah, I heard that they can, when they want to give it up, they give it up the entire way.
Yeah. Oh yeah. On a string. But
And coming from a black duck hunter like myself, I could really use some of that on a string thing right now.
Yeah, I know it. Well, I think the way this whole beginning of end of December, beginning of January has been, I have really high hopes for the finisher here for both of us. So hopefully we'll be able to stack it up, and hopefully we'll be back with you guys at least 2 or 3 times before the end of the season, giving you some updates and doing just exactly what Brendan said, talking through some hunts and really trying to give you guys good information that you can use specific to the Forgotten Flyway.